Hello and welcome to a recap of our lecture on external factors. Don't forget that you can download all of our mind maps as PDFs for free from the website shown, or indeed purchase the full course on which this recap is based should you wish to do so. So the first thing we looked at in this lecture was the mission of the organisation. Now remember, that's the purpose of the organisation. And Drucker told us that there were four things that the mission should tell us. It should tell us what is the business. It should also tell us what do customers value from the business, what should the business be, and what will it be. So those were the key areas of the mission. Now there was also the mission statement that we discussed. Remember, this is a brief general statement. It states the purpose or aims of the organisation. It's not generally focused on the commercial areas, but it tells you the direction of the strategy, the goals or objectives of the organisation. To sum that up, the mission statement of the organisation would state its reason for being. We also discussed at this point the objectives of the organisation. So the objectives of the organisation should be SMART. They should be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. So SMART objectives mean that the organisation is more likely to achieve them. It also means that they're more likely to get goal congruence. Remember, that's the goals of the organisation being tied in with the goals of management. There are some problems when setting organisational objectives, such as prioritisation of those objectives, conflicting objectives within the organisation, the fact that a lot of them are hard to measure and can lead to short-termism. It's also difficult to set objectives that satisfy everyone within the organisation, but they should be trying to do that. We moved on then to corporate social responsibility, CSR, and this was really an ethical approach by the organisation. There are some issues when it comes to this. One of the main ones is that there are cultural variations between different areas of the world and different areas and cultures. That means that what's socially responsible in one area may not necessarily be in another. Also remember, Friedman says that the business of business is business, i.e. to maximise the shareholder wealth, not to worry about anything else, about social issues. That's the problem of government, not business. But if you think in that way, there are some problems such as product safety, working conditions, honesty, the working environment as well as the external environment, possibly discrimination, and of course philanthropy and charitable donations. All of those are ignored if we simply seek to maximise shareholder wealth. So there are some ethical stances that a business could take. If they bought into the simple maximisation of shareholder wealth, they would simply look at short-term shareholder interest to maximise their profit. They may also look at long-term shareholder interest, which is similar to that, except we're maximising value over the long term. We're not worrying about any other ethical approaches. Or we could think about multiple stakeholder obligations. Now this is taking a bit of a wider view. It's involving your stakeholders, those with a legitimate interest in the business, but no one else, not the wider community or the public at large. Or a business could be a shaper of society. This is an ideological stance where the business actually looks to society as a whole and tries to contribute and make it better. So we looked at all of those in illustration 1, and then we moved on to look at stakeholders. Remember, stakeholders are those parties that have a legitimate interest in the business. And in this module, we are particularly interested in undertaking a power analysis. By doing that, we can identify the key stakeholders, establish their interest and the claims that they have. We can also determine the ability of those stakeholders to influence our business and identify any potential conflicts with them. That means that we can attempt, therefore, to minimise that conflict. So the groups that we might identify and the powers that they will have will be the staff, first of all, whose power will stem from a unionised workforce and from the provision of their skills base. The government, who will have an interest because of regulations that are imposed, as well as interference perhaps for political reasons. In addition to that, we have the banks, who will be setting loan terms for the business and may be able to put pressure on the business based on those. Then we have the customers and suppliers who have alliances and who have maybe got bulk volume discounts, etc. that we want to take advantage of. So Mendelow said that we could put all of these interests into what's called a power interest matrix to decide how we should treat those various stakeholders. So remember, on the left hand side here we have the power running from low power to high power, and the level of interest running again from low interest to high interest. Those with high power and low interest we should keep satisfied. Those with low power and low interest, well, we don't really need to do much with those, they take minimal effort. Those with low power but a high level of interest we should keep informed so that they don't become irritating, they don't get too involved in the business when they have no real power to affect it. And those with high power and high interest are the key players, the key stakeholders that we need to make sure we keep well on top of, keep informed and work with. When it comes to relationships then between the business and the stakeholders, there needs to be management of the stakeholder relationships. They need to establish a responsibility for each stakeholder and a budget. They need to target conflict areas with stakeholders and meet with the groups involved. If there is conflict between the entity and stakeholders, they need to think about various ways to treat that. For example, satisficing, which means coming to a compromise. Sequential attention, getting each stakeholder to take turns to look at the problems and issues they have. Side payments, i.e. appeasing those stakeholders with maybe giving them some of the things they want. Or exercise of power, which you could use in a deadlock and simply say, this is the way things are. When it comes to non-market strategies involving stakeholders, we might look at governments and try to foresee their actions. We might look at non-government organisations and try to work with them. And we might focus on the media and society to manage how we're perceived by them. If we have to work with the government, we may want to try and influence what they're doing. Maybe they're going to come out with some legislation that will affect our business. We may therefore need to lobby governments. We may need to have ex-MPs on our board as non-executive directors to give us an idea of how to deal with the government. Or we may try to influence public opinion to try and sway government based on that. And we looked at stakeholders in illustration 2. So that was a recap of our lecture on external factors.